Good morning and welcome to the Operational Services Committee meeting for October 10th, 2023. Call this meeting to order. We don't have any delegations this morning, and so we're going to go into our reports. And Chief Glavin, for the service area update, please.
Thank you, Chair Bosch. We'll start off in energy and environment. There's the upcoming third annual Drop and Swap is scheduled for October 21st at the Ernie Radbourne Pavilion, and clothing is going to be accepted for donation on the October 18th, 19th, and 20th, leading up to the event from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m., and the event will run from noon to 4 on the 21st. In engineering services, we are starting to round out our capital projects for the construction season. Currently, there is a local road reconstruction occurring on 112th and 112A Avenue and 93rd Street in Mount View. They're starting their concrete work this week, and all should be wrapped up before winter. The slope repair project in Muskosipi Park, north of 68th Avenue, is also nearing completion. It's expected that almost everything will be complete, with some minor landscaping that will be completed in the spring of next year. The Range Road 64 drainage project is starting today, and we'll have all major works completed this year, with some landscaping that'll be completed in the spring. As well, the spillway project is essentially all complete now, with some minor items and a little bit of cleanup and deficiency work that it's expected to be completed before winter. The Aquaterra 101st Street project in Swanhaven has the underground work completed, and they're actively working on the base and concrete work, and also expected to be complete before winter. There are also a couple other Aquaterra projects on Resources Road, just adjacent to City Hall here, that they expect to have completed on the 21st, by the 21st of October, as well as the excavation on 108th Street over by Canfor is expected to be complete by the 21st. In facilities, the Eastlink shutdown is currently on schedule to be reopening on the 23rd of October, with the exception of the 25-meter pool that's expected to reopen by November 6th. Essentially, there was some additional work that was identified in the 50-meter pool that they chose to prioritize over the 25-meter pool to get that back up and running on time, which delayed the November 6th. So essentially, there was some stuff that wasn't in the initial scope of the shutdown that was identified after they drained the water. In transit, the late night ridership is continuing to increase, and they're averaging about 20 rides per day between 9 p.m. and 11 p.m. In parks, the fall turf fertilization is ongoing, as well as on the tree planting side. The 100th Ave tree groves are complete, and the International Paper Tree Grove is nearing completion, just awaiting the installation of signage on that site. And looking forward to winter, residents can now apply for the Neighborhood Rink program online. In transportation, our equipment is being converted from summer to winter operations. The plow truck fleet is prepared for snow as of now, so anything that comes at us right now, they're prepared to deal with it. On the pothole side, focusing on repairs in advance of the winter weather. And with that, I'll take any questions.
Thank you, Chief Glavin. Is there any? Councillor Berg.
Thank you, Chair Bosch. Director Glavin, for the International Paper Grove, can you give us a location for that?
Thank you, Chair Bosch. It is at just south of 132nd Avenue, east of 108th Street, kind of the northwest corner of Royal Oaks.
Okay, yeah, thank you. And again, thanks to International Paper for sponsoring that on their 50th anniversary. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? I just have one on, as far as the heated bus shelters, ETA at Town Centre Mall. Do we have we talked potentially November, but is there an update?
Thank you, Chair Bosch. Yes, actually there is, and I think I probably should have had that on here, but didn't. So essentially, we have been informed that the manufacturer is going through a restructuring, and we will not receive them prior to winter. We're looking for alternative suppliers at the moment to see if we can get them sooner. If we have to stay with the existing supplier for the project. We likely won't receive them until after March of 2024 at the moment, but procurement and facilities is currently trying to find an alternative supplier to speed up the project, but we just received that information last week.
Thank you, Chair Glavin. That doesn't make me happy, but what can you do? We'll move on to playground strategy, and Chief Glavin, could you introduce this, please?
Thank you, Chair Bosch. So administration has developed a playground strategy to provide guidance for the replacement of traditional playground structures with some alternative amenities. These could be things like small bike park or pump track, toboggan hills, court space, or anything in that vein that would be outside of the traditional structures that we're currently putting on, with the goal of providing different recreational amenities as well as lower operating and capital costs over the long term. And with that, I will pass it over to Mr. DeVries.
Welcome, Mr. DeVries.
Thank you, Chair Bosch. Here to present that strategy for the playgrounds. As of 2023, there are 130 playgrounds within the city of Grande Prairie. 104 of those are owned and operated by the city, and 26 are located on school sites. City playgrounds undergo regular inspections and maintenance, of course, like any asset. However, they eventually reach a point where replacement is required. So the playground strategy that's contained in Attachment 1 is the city's approach to prioritizing the renewal of existing playgrounds and, of course, looking at development of alternative amenities within parks. The strategy itself adopts a data-driven approach, so it really focuses on geospatial analysis, so walking times to each of those playgrounds, as well as neighborhood demographics to help us with consistent decision-making. In the report itself, there's an example hypothetical scenario that sort of walks through how administration would use the tool. This is an example of Countryside South. And essentially what this example presents is it's illustrating how a neighborhood that currently has 8 individual playgrounds could transform over the course of several years into a neighborhood with 5 playgrounds, a gazebo, a bike pump track, a playable court, and a small sledding hill. Obviously, administration will look to engage with neighborhoods and neighborhood associations if there are instances where a playground is recommended to be replaced with a different amenity. And we would anticipate presenting a menu of options for that site to the neighborhood and work with them on selecting the best alternative. The strategy itself and the tools developed within will then support future capital requests. So future requests for amenities or playgrounds will be put through this tool and the strategy. Administration will then evaluate essentially a year ahead to ensure that we're having time and space for that engagement piece. And then those requests for those playgrounds and or amenities would come through capital deliberations. So with that, the recommendation for this report is that the Operational Services Committee recommend Council approve the playground strategy as presented in Attachment 1.
Thank you, Director DeVries. Councillor Thiessen.
Thank you very much, Chair Bosch. Thank you very much, Mr. DeVries. Just for the record, I love Playground 119. So do the grandkids. It's a lot of fun to go play at in Countryside South. Looking at the report and the strategy, I think it's really, really great work. The one thing I didn't see, and I was hoping maybe you could point me in the direction of that in the strategy. A lot of the options were given to provide alternative playground amenities, but there wasn't any consideration that I could find that when we would trigger a decommissioning of a playground, so let's say a neighborhood is fully serviced with playgrounds, even an alternative amenity, is just adding on to it. But does the strategy contemplate when we would consider decommissioning a park altogether?
Thank you. Through Chair Bosch, you're correct. Generally, the approach is to provide some type of amenity back into that green space. We would work with those neighborhoods, and if there was a desire that just flat green space is fine, then we could look at that option. But where we can, we would work to try and replace the playground with some type of an amenity, for that park space.
Okay. Now, would we consider at all? When does the city? Do we have a trigger point to when we consider like decommissioning a playground? Like it's too expensive to add on to this, to replace it, or to change it altogether, and just to have a green field space where kids can kick a ball in?
Thank you, through Chair Bosch. So essentially how that tool works is if there's a playground that's identified through regular maintenance inspections that it needs to be replaced, then that would trigger the process of evaluating the neighborhood, its demographics, as well as the spatial position of other playgrounds in that neighborhood. If, as in the example, that playground is one that could potentially come out and could be a different amenity, then that's how we would work through making those decisions as to, what is that site good for. Perhaps it has some existing topography that we could lean in and put in a sledding hill, or work with the neighborhood as to what additional amenity might work well for that space. So that's sort of how the process would move. So as soon as our maintenance records indicate that a playground is at that tipping point, then that's where we would start the evaluation for that playground and the surrounding neighborhood.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Burke.
Thank you, Chair Bosch. Thanks for getting on top of this case. I was at a seminar earlier this year, and this was one of the exact topics. And what it discussed was the evolution of a neighborhood, where primarily it's young families that move in. Those children grow up to be teenagers, and they leave home as adults, and then the home becomes grandparents' house. And quite often, once the parents downsize, it can often turn into a rental, or again, it's adult living. And so there is an evolution of the park spaces and their use. How do we monitor how our parks are used? Is there any types of surveys? Do we rely on neighborhood associations? How do we know when a playground is cycling down and not being used as much as it used to?
Yeah, thank you. Through Chair Bosch, we have conducted surveys in the past. Working with the neighborhood associations is sort of the grassroots best method in terms of garnering, what is this neighborhood looking for today and into the future. So those are methods for sure that we can employ, as well as the demographic information that we can obtain through working with our GIS department. So that helps us better understand, for example, the age range of the residents within a certain neighborhood. So just speaking to that, cycling of a neighborhood that's perhaps young with young children. So that information flows through GIS within our tool that we're using for the playground strategy, and that helps us to understand, is there a lot of children in this neighborhood, or have those children since moved on and now we're looking at an older demographic, and how do we tailor those amenities to that area?
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Palat.
Thanks, Chair Bosch. Just building on Councillor Thiessen's comment a little bit. One thing that makes me wonder when I look at this report, it's really a good eye opener, and I appreciate the cross section of just one development like that. But do we have parks that are 5 years old that we would go, this probably isn't a park we'd need today, that we should just decommission, put on the shelf somewhere, and then use it as a replacement park rather than waiting till it runs out of its course of life? Now it's worth nothing, and then we're buying a whole brand new park when we actually didn't need it. If we identified parks that we could just go say, not getting used, let's pluck this thing, let's put it in the shelf in the backyard, and instead of us buying a new park when one comes up, it seems weird to me that we're going to just let a park run its course when we can almost prove that we probably didn't need it. So has there been any identification of parks less than 5 years old, let's pull it? Any thoughts like that on properly utilizing the inventory that we have?
Thank you, through Chair Bosch. Not to this point. So the intent would be that when a playground is up for replacement after its normal life cycle is when we would evaluate that location. Pulling a playground early, we could be, I guess, not getting the best bang out of that playground itself in terms of the dollars that have been invested. So the way that it's set up currently is to work with the existing scope, and then once those life cycle out is when we would evaluate that site for an alternative amenity.
So not a voting member on this one. That would be an interesting thing to ask for a report back on. It's just, again, if we're basically saying we know in our heart that this site's not going to get repurposed for a park, and it's a 5-year-old park, why are we just letting it run its course? I guess to me is one thing. When you can prove in that area there's a lot of other parks. My second comment on this, because I like where this is building, and I think this will lead into a lot more conversations as we go, but we always feel the need to put things back. And so I'm wondering, have we ever looked at just pulling a park and just not putting it back? And if they want it back, having the community pay for it. And I'm saying that when, this is I've joked with this council about I can't believe we make the people in Pinnacle Ridge pay for a fountain. If an area really thinks they're underutilized for parks, should they not come together and put in that 5th park and they pay for it, and that's a community need in their area, and it becomes a special levy for that area? Is that something we've ever looked at?
Through Chair Bosch, no, that model is not something that we've looked at in particular to playgrounds.
Okay, just something I'll throw on the radar. I think that's something we got to really start considering. If we go to a neighborhood association and say, "What do you want?" They're always going to want more. They're going to want more things. They're not going to want things taken away. I just think there's an opportunity here for us to right size the park system in its own way. I'll say, from people that have young kids, I'm not certainly not anti-park. I think they're great, but they do most parks I see are well underutilized. And what I'm seeing more and more is the parks by Councillor Bessie and O'Toole's home. These regional parks are getting a lot more usage. So I'd rather see us looking at more regional parks that are bigger, that create a lot more inclusivity in an area than two people playing on one playground. So just my comments, and maybe something I'll be trying to ask through financial services. Is that an opportunity that we could start actually having neighborhood associations be more involved? And can we put levies on parks in the future if you think you need more?
Thank you. Councillor Bessie.
Thank you. It's interesting to talk about those big splashy parks that we could build for your folks. Talk about that lifespan of a neighborhood. I really think my neighborhood's having young families buy rather than turning into that adult-only community because of the large park that was put in it. When I talk to people that are buying in the neighborhood, the regional-style park is why people are buying there. So definitely some strategy we could do there. I'm curious in terms of alternative amenities. I know years ago now, Mayor Clayton, well then Councillor Clayton and I were at an event where we were showing success a lot of communities have had just putting in large boulders in parks. Just those very naturalized features that are cheap to do, never require any replacement, and kids up to 5 or 6 can have a lot of fun just on a big boulder. I'm wondering if we've considered that as a type of replacement amenity to put in.
Yeah, thank you. Through Chair Bosch, it is something that we can consider. One of the aspects we have to look into detail on is just regarding safety of those assets. So we might have to sign the areas, use at your own risk. Obviously, the playgrounds that we do install are CSA approved. That's the standard that we inspect them and maintain them at. But if there are alternative amenities, that whether it's a small sledding hill, a selection of boulders, there's something that we can definitely look at. But again, we would have to just evaluate the safety factor of it before installation.
Councillor Bessie, go ahead.
Yeah, and if I may ask one different question, I appreciate that one of the considerations is demographics in terms of age of neighborhood. I'm wondering if there was any consideration of including consideration of average income of a neighborhood in our factors for making decisions.
Through Chair Bosch, we didn't include specific average incomes of neighborhood. We focused in particular on the demographics, and in particular with that, the number of children between the ages 0 and 14 within each neighborhood. So not as much work in regards to the income component.
I know for me personally, that's an important consideration. In a neighborhood where there's higher average income, you've got kids are a lot more likely to be in extracurriculars instead of having to find entertainment to do after school. Parents are a lot more likely to have 2 vehicles, and maybe even a parent who's at home part-time or full-time to drive kids to these regional parks that we've got. Also, I know in some of our neighborhoods with higher incomes, there's a mini playground in almost every backyard, it feels like, too. And other neighborhoods can't afford that. So for me personally, it's a neighborhood with a lower average income is one that I'm more keen to have over service compared to one with a higher average income. So for me personally, that's a consideration I think we should be including. It's not the only consideration, but definitely one consideration for me personally.
Okay, thank you. I'm just going to ask a question on behalf of Councillor Thiessens and Lutz to some degree. Just getting back to the committee directions on this report, it says committee amend the parks capital budget under playground replacement program to remove funding of $500,000 in 2023. In this report, is that criteria gotten to, or have you received? Is there an ability to save $500,000 in 2023 based on this report?
Chair Bosch, that's just a direction from the budget deliberations last fall. So the direction there was to remove the funding that was allocated for playground replacement, and then the conversation that ensued was around we should develop this strategy so that we have better decision-making process for that type of a request in the future. Yeah.
Good. Thanks for the reminder.
Yep.
Okay. Is there any other questions? Mayor Clayton.
Thanks, Chair Bosch. Just tell me in the process of evaluation, so a traditional playground like pictured on page 10 of the report is put into a neighborhood, the neighborhood ages, we assess the facility, the asset every year, but who would be keeping track of and with that, we know the neighborhood potentially is 10 years older, et cetera, and all of a sudden it's time for replacement. Would it be administration's thought that then you come to council prior to budget deliberation to say this neighborhood needs a basketball hoop, or this one could have, like you mentioned, small bike pump track, that type of thing? How often do you foresee this coming for discussion?
Yeah, thank you. Through Chair Bosch, the intent would be to work almost a year in advance. And so that would allow us, so let's say there's 5 playgrounds that need to be assessed based on their age and they're up for replacement. 3 of those playgrounds we've worked through could be alternative amenities. That year, we would then work with the neighborhoods to sort out what those amenities should be. The touch point with council, currently, the intended touch point would be at budget deliberations, where council would see those options come up and see, okay, 2 playgrounds, 2 sledding hills, and a bike pump track. So by that point, the intent would be that we had already completed that engagement with those neighborhoods where we're switching the amenity. So that's currently how we anticipate this moving forward.
Can I have one more? Thanks, Chair Bosch. In that consideration, would there be any, when appropriate, would there be any consideration for neighborhood gardens?
Yeah, thank you. Through Chair Bosch, that is definitely an option of an amenity. So if we look at demographics have changed in a neighborhood, that we could potentially propose a garden or an orchard that might work better with the demographics. So that is certainly an alternate amenity that's on the table. Yeah.
And I think, of neighborhoods that maybe don't have the biggest backyards, et cetera, if they have a suitable playground, maybe they want to have a bunch of raised beds to grow things for the neighborhood. So.
And if I may, sorry, Chair Bosch, yeah, there is currently a policy in place for neighborhoods to come forward and apply for a community garden, so that could be part of that process then.
Perfect. Thank you.
Councillor Palat.
Thanks, Chair Bosch. Just looking in the strategy, in our Parks and Open Space plan on page, I think, 6 of it, it's talking about our distances should be 400 to 600 meters. I'm just wondering if have we looked at other municipalities? Like, is that a norm across the province, or is that prescriptive amount forcing us to have more parks that we would have normally not had if it was 600 to 800 meters or 800 meters to 1,000 meters?
Yeah, through Chair Bosch, that number from the Parks Master Plan is the number that we've worked with, so we haven't cross-referenced it in detail, but that is a number where it's roughly that 5-minute walking distance. So that's something that we've worked with in terms of how we're setting up our tool through GIS is based on a 5-minute walking distance, which is roughly 400 to 600 meters.
Okay, so that's just historically how we've used it. We haven't checked to see if that's kind of a norm still adopted around the province from other municipalities.
Through Chair Bosch, yeah, that the literature that was cited in the Parks Master Plan, so that's essentially what we're referencing here.
Okay,
yeah.
Thank you.
All right, is there anybody else? No? On this committee, Councillor Thiessen, Councillor O'Toole, which is absent, Mayor Clayton, and myself. So we're looking to do business. Councillor Thiessen.
Thank you, Chair Bosch. I've got 2 pieces of business. I'll just start with the general recommendation. I would move that the Operational Services Committee recommend Council approve the playground strategy as presented in Attachment 1. Speaking to this motion, I think it's a good piece of work. One area where I've already asked a question on is in regards to when we decommission those sites, and I don't think that was addressed in this document. But all the other work in it is incredible, I thought, and I think it'll give our administration a good foundation on which to evaluate our playgrounds going forward, and to recommend to council which ones require further investment and which one could be maybe repurposed to an orchard or something cool like that. So I think for all those reasons we should support this, and yeah, I'm ready to vote.
Thank you. Any comments or questions? Let's call. Thank you. That is passed. And you had another motion?
Yeah, thank you very much, Councillor Bosch, Chair Bosch. I would move to direct administration to bring back a report to committee in regards to the triggers that would implement the decommissioning of playgrounds within the city of Grande Prairie. Speaking to that, I think this is just that bit of business that wasn't identified in this playground strategy, and I think we should have a get-out strategy in some neighborhoods too. And I don't think that's a bad thing. I think it empowers our administration to make all of the assessments that they need to bring the recommendations forward to council on where they think these playgrounds can be enhanced or altogether removed. So, thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Thiessen. That's in order. Any questions? We'll call the question. Okay, and that is carried. We're going to move into the naturalization update. Chief Glavin, could you introduce this, please?
Thank you, Chair Bosch. So the city commenced a 3-year pilot program in 3 different areas of the city for naturalization at the beginning of this year. Over the course of the growing season, administration has provided some information to adjacent residents, had a in-person sessions, the naturalization webpage, and then we've continued to have our Engage GP page available and produced a What We Heard report. A lot of what we heard at the beginning of this has been the same as what we've heard throughout. There's concerns over aesthetics and safety, among numerous other items. And as council knows, there's been some delegations and I'm sure a number of emails on the subject. And today we have Mr. DeVries, who will present the results of the first year with some recommendations.
Thank you. Director DeVries, can you go ahead, please?
Thanks, Chair Bosch. As mentioned, the report fairly lengthy. It touches particularly on the pilot program, but also discusses naturalization as a whole. So just to give some context, since 2018, approximately 97 hectares, which is equivalent to 119 Canadian football fields of land within the city, has undergone this naturalization process, and this accounts for about 14% of the entire mowing scope before those naturalization efforts. In particular, with the pilot program, as was mentioned, the pilot program spans 3 separate locations and a total of 13 hectares along boulevards, Resources Road, 84th Avenue, and 116th Avenue as well. Just looking at how that first year went, ecologically, the pilot sites exhibited the expected response to the cessation of mowing. There was some noxious weed concerns that came up at a few of the locations, in particular the berms, and then along some of the private property fence lines as well. 84th Avenue site demonstrated the highest potential for volunteer tree growth. It's something we look for when we're naturalizing sites. However, this substantial growth actually presents a few challenges at that site with regards to the existing overhead power and then the need to preserve some of that boulevard space for winter snow storage. On the social front, as was mentioned, administration organized 3 on-site engagement sessions, 1 at each of the pilot locations. The feedback obtained from those sessions has been combined with ongoing feedback that's been received through Access GP and the web pages, and that's put together in the What We Heard document, which is in attachment 3. Generally, attendees expressed concerns about the pilot, ranging from a desire for consultation regarding locations to also some concerns regarding wildlife and fire risks. With regards to the fire risks, administration did spend some time working with the Grande Prairie Fire Department over the course of the summer to evaluate, in particular, the pilot locations in terms of fire risks and what potential adjustments could and should be done. The findings of that assessment do align with Council's direction from September 5th, which is to maintain some of that mowing space right along the backside of private properties. In those conversations with the Grande Prairie Fire Department, of course, we expanded our view beyond just the pilot program to look at other intentionally naturalized lands, in particular those lands that are adjacent to private properties and residential properties. Again, same line of thought from the fire department on that was that where possible to maintain a mowed strip should be done. However, in consultation with the fire department, it was emphasized that no compromises on health and safety should be made just to merely maintain a mowed strip of turf. Some of the sites as well are persistently wet, which of course generally present lower overall fire risks. So attachment 4 in the report really shows that analysis, several different areas across the city where we have that interface between intentionally naturalized land and an adjoining or adjacent residential properties. So with that, I'll read out the recommendations from that first year. So the recommendations read that the Operational Services Committee recommend Council direct administration to, number 1, adjust the pilot program to return areas adjacent to residential property to pre-pilot mowing rotations. Number 2, to adjust the pilot program to return that south portion of 84th Avenue to the pre-pilot mowing rotations, and that's to avoid those future tree conflicts with existing overhead power and the snow storage capacity. And then finally, number 3, to adjust citywide locations of naturalization outside of the pilot program to accommodate those fire smart principles where feasible, as presented in attachment 4. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. DeReeves. Any questions? Councillor. Oh, Mayor Clayton is up first, and then you, Councillor O'Connor.
Thanks for that, Mr. DeVries. Can you tell me that we heard, as you mentioned, and Council heard on numerous occasions, what will we do to mitigate noxious weeds in the naturalized areas going forward?
Yeah, thank you. Through Chair Bosch. So in areas where we've ceased mowing and then there are noxious weeds that come through, the city's approach to that is to handle it through our integrated pest management team. So our weed inspectors would find those weeds, assign them to our spray crew, and they would walk to or ensure that those spots are hand sprayed.
And sorry, just how frequent will that assessment be?
Through Chair Bosch, the assessment is ongoing. So early in the season, the weed inspectors will walk through, and then potentially mid-season, and then near the end of the season. So potentially 3 different approaches to that, depending on how the weeds respond to that first spray.
Councillor O'Connor.
Thank you, Chair Bosch. Mine concern relates to the Mission Hill Toboggan and Ravine. Even though it's not part of this study, you do mention that looking at fire smarting different areas. And because this is a recreation area for 2 schools, the YMCA, and I really think it's important that we ask administration to look at that. I can't make a motion on this committee, but I think it's important that we hear the residents and that they use this area on a regular basis, and they've had intrusion of animals and pest wildlife into their backyards. We've seen overgrowth of a number of different species that shouldn't be there, of weeds, and also because it's a recreation area. So I'm wondering if committee would take a look at different areas in the city and reevaluate, because a fire smart is the main issue. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Burke.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Bosch. That was one of the things that I was going to touch on too. Basically, around that delegation we had last week, is there any recommendations in here that would address that? And I'm assuming not. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, through Chair Bosch. No, so there's no specific recommendations in the report as it stands. The current scope for parks within the Mission Ravine is to mow the floor, if the bottom contour, if you will, of that ravine, which does provide access and space within there, and then once a year on that toboggan hill.
Thanks. And I guess as a follow-up, if I may, do we have different types of park designations as we go through the city?
Through Chair Bosch, there's just different designations of land. So municipal reserve is classic park. There's also environmental reserve and areas like that as well.
And the Mission Ravine, do you recall what that might be?
Through Chair Bosch, that is environmental reserve.
Okay.
Thank you. Councillor Bressie.
Great, thank you. Just trying to recall, so the Mission Heights Ravine, I don't think do we mow the whole floor, or do we just mow one walking path through it?
Through Chair Bosch, the intent is to mow that bottom contour. So in times it squeezes down just to one width. At other times it does widen out.
Well, and I definitely know for me, I'm not on this committee, but when this comes to council, something I intend to make motions around, if nobody beats me to it, is the Mission Heights Ravine. I respect that there's parts of that ravine that we might have mowed in the past that are unsafe to do so, but I know that there also is, I think there's probably more of it than we're regularly mowing right now that we can safely do so, and certainly we can mow those toboggan hills more than once a year. So I definitely personally think we should be doing more mowing in there. I think we've heard crystal clear from the neighborhood their expectations. I get why this was one of the first sites put in naturalization with it should never have been mowed in the first place maybe 30 years ago, but the fact of the matter is it was, and I think that's a level of service that we should be continuing. So not a committee today, but definitely intend to bring that up at council.
Maybe we'll just stick to what this report is about, and if somebody from our committee could make a motion that would bring that information from Mission Heights to council, I would appreciate that, because I do agree. Mayor Clayton.
Just a question for either Mr. DeVries or Chief Clavin. What's the process and the potential expense to change from a environmental reserve to a recreation park area?
Chief Clavin.
Thank you, Chair Bosch. I'll have to coordinate with planning on what we will need to do in order to potentially remove an ER designation and redesignate it as MR.
Thanks.
Thank you. So just my 2 cents on this. On the Resources Road pilot, the images are not from the highway piece, from Resources Road. They're more from the residential side. And to me, I question why we're doing the pilot program on the west side and not working with the tree line that is already nature-based and doing the east side more in a naturalization process. I think it looks messy, and is there any way that we could maybe adjust from the west side and do more naturalization to the east side, which would blend with the natural tree line there anyway?
Yeah, it's Chair Bosch. The east side of Resources was attempted and naturalized a few years ago. One of the concerns that came up were the wildlife factor. So typically what happens is the wildlife follow the train tracks up into the city. And then that was a situation where naturalizing on that east side created some concerns from a traffic safety perspective in the wildlife that were coming across. So that was part of the rationale for ensuring that there is a good width of boulevard that's mowed to improve sightlines on that east side.
Well, I can tell you just from 2 days ago, they were going to the west side, the deer. So I don't think a highway is going to stop them if there's grass and clover growing on the other side. For me, I would prefer to eliminate Resources Road on the west side in particular, because I guess, and I've said this to people, and this is just like Mission Heights or 84th, when you have company coming to your house, such as visitors to our city, you do the 10-second tidy, and I don't feel we look very tidy right now. So unless it is, in my opinion, planned with a little more intention, and of course that comes with finances, I think the process we have right now on Resources doesn't sit with me well, nor does it on 84th. But I'll leave it to my colleagues to correct me if they think I'm wrong. Councillor Berg and then Mayor Clayton.
Yeah, thanks, Chair Bosch. Anecdotally, I had a friend that backed onto that and on the Resources Road. And it was interesting because every time I went over there, and this is prior to me being on council, they just said their comments were quite the opposite. Like, why doesn't the city do something? Like right now, there's a hill behind my house and traffic. It would be great to have some trees in there. And so again, to me, we do need to do naturalization with intention, to plant some trees, that surely will come up at budget to, in my mind, we pick one spot a year and go ahead, so it doesn't have to have a huge impact all at once. But again, that's a budget discussion. But again, I've had the opposite, where right now they've just got this mowed hill behind their house and then a busy road. And they would love some naturalization and some trees, which is why I first brought it up and would love the idea. But again, it has to be with intention.
Right, and I think that's what we're missing at the moment. Mayor Clayton.
Thanks, Chair Bosch. Can you tell me, Mr. DeVries, in the ongoing evaluation of naturalization, where's the strategy for enhancing the naturalized areas so that they're not just native, so that they're actually, they look with intent, they look aesthetically pleasing, not just what appears to be now that we just let it go?
Yeah, thank you. Through Chair Bosch, it is something that we slowly pick away at. Obviously, finances are required to execute some specific planting projects. So over the course of those 5 years where we've naturalized locations, the preferred method to do so obviously is the cessation of mowing. But since that time, there has been some effort within the budgets we have to go back through and add to those sites. So the installation of certain clovers, for example, on some of the steeper slopes, as well the planting of seedlings, which we do every spring. We try and plant 4,000 to 5,000 seedlings, and we focus some of those efforts on some of these previously naturalized locations. So a lot of conversation around naturalization with intent certainly is something that we look at in terms of the full scope that we have naturalized. Is now a matter of looking at those locations and understanding, what is the future of each of these sites. Is one near a forested area where then by default trees make most sense for augmentation, or is it an area that's sort of a natural grassy slope that should be maintained in that fashion? So some of the sort of long-term vision for these areas is along those lines, where we're looking at how do we augment each site so that it is more than just tall grass.
Thank you. Councillor Bressie.
Great, thank you. Yeah, I wanted to chime in along these lines in terms of absolutely, if somebody's coming to my house, I do the 10-minute tidy to make it look spick and span, but I'm also okay with people seeing an absolute disaster in my house because it's obvious I'm in the middle of renovations, and we both know it'll look a lot more beautiful in the time, and I'm okay having ugly sites for a couple years if it's getting us something that's beautiful and cuts off noise going into our neighborhoods and retains stormwater and does all that good stuff. So just something the committee might think about is, I know I'm not the only one in council that's got some desire to be more intentional, more quicker, more aggressive on putting in trees, enforcing and being intentional with this than Mother Nature might do on her own, and that our existing park budget currently allows. And I know for me, I've got appetite come budget deliberations to be able to have a conversation about, are we going to invest more capital dollars in this for a few years? So it's thought for committee that we might make, I can't, but I'd love to see a motion to have proposals come to budget deliberation so we can actually consider putting more resources behind this.
Councillor Thiessen.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair Bosch. Thanks for the great report here, Mr. DeVries. Yeah, and I've said this since the beginning. Like, I love the idea of naturalization. It has a lot of benefits, but when we're intentional about what we put in there, and it could be trees, it could be wildflowers. Heck, we even put tall grasses at the Montrose Cultural Center that seem to look fairly nice, and I see other communities have incorporated them along their roadways as well. I think what we see here from the recommendations, or at least what I see from the recommendations, is we're operating this simply as a pilot project, and we're recognizing that some things are working and some things are not working, and we're going back to the drawing board. I think with council, maybe if we've got those ideas, we can give a bit more direction to Case, and he can shoot us down or pump our tires for such a great idea, one or the other, on whether or not that works. I'm not opposed to anything coming forward to budget. I'm not prepared, though, to make the motion today, and I look forward to those future discussions. I guess one question for me, if we still are doing questions and not just doing the business, in regards to rezoning an area land. I know that there was asked about costs and stuff like that, but couldn't, like, if council chose, talking with administration, couldn't we redesignate an ER to an MR through a simple motion of council at the next meeting? Because I think, I don't know, I get a lot of this, but there's some areas that we have, and definitely this is going to disappoint the neighborhood association that came forward to us at council meeting, because it doesn't address really any of those concerns. I do like the naturalization as it's rolling. So the recommendations that are presented, I'd be prepared to make those motions as they stand. I don't feel like they need to be split. I think it's an admission that, hey, we got a little more work to do till 2025 to have this running optimally through the city. But if there are no more questions, then I'll make the motions as presented, and if there's any subsequent, then we can go from there.
Thank you. We have Councillor Paulette first.
Thanks, Chair Bosch. I'm just curious on Resources Road specifically, and something that we've talked about naturalization, but the Councillor Thiessen's, we've kind of said it's this pilot project, but have we run what it would look like if we were going to continue to mow that for 10 years versus what it would cost to naturalize it? And my thoughts on that is, we can continue to mow those berms on Resources Road forever, and that's going to come with a cost forever. Or what would the cost be if we actually said, let's naturalize these berms along Resources Road? I kind of wonder if this is a 5-year payback, 7-year payback, 10-year payback. And for me, that's important, because I think we do have to put money at it, but we have to appreciate at some point, if we're going to put upfront capital money, there should be an operational savings at some point. If we're not mowing 7 or 8 hours or 10 hours every week on berms that nobody's ever using for anything other than they drive by and look at it. And I'm kind of with Councillor Berg. I hear more negatives on us mowing berms than I hear positives. I hear more negatives about it than by a landslide than positives to me. But I think it's got to be done with intent. So if we're going to action money to it, I'm fine. But there is a cause and effect here that I don't think we've discussed yet, and that there should be an operational savings at some point if we naturalize areas. So I think the bigger question to me would be at budget is, if we were going to take an area to try it, let's put up the capital to try it, but then there should be an operational savings over time. And I think that's the conversation we need to be leading towards, because it is a chicken and egg right now. It feels like we're throwing all this money, but there is a benefit longer term. And I don't think we've discussed the longer term financial benefits of the city to start naturalizing. So, maybe that's something we can ask for to again, I'm not a voting member on this, but I do think we need to start getting into the meats and potatoes about a specific area of naturalization and what it would look like. And maybe that specific area turns into a business case we've ran to say, well, if we do so many hectares, this is how much time we'd spend mowing. This is how much time it's going to cost to naturalize. You can blanket in other areas. I know I'm oversimplifying this a bit, but I think there's a model that we could run, and we could look at specifically targeting naturalized areas every year. So it was done with intent. Because I think driving down Resources Road, where there was actually tree growth and some natural flowers, would look so much more appealing than it is now. Councillor Bressley had great pictures of what it looks like when you're on the walking side on our bypass, which I don't hear people saying that our bypass is ugly now, and yet it's been naturalized. So I do think if it's done right, it's a long-term benefit. We just have to action some money, but see the cost and benefit down the road.
Well, I think Mr. DeReeves has got your point. Additionally, can we add in there, particular in that case where you're talking about wildlife, how do we deal with that? Because if you start putting flowers and grasses and clovers, even intentionally, that wildlife has no trouble crossing a highway. So just components to that. And I think we look forward to this discussion at council, which will include Mission Heights in the future. So just so you know, that's coming too. And Councillor Thiessen.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair Boss. I'll just throw in 2 cents around wildlife. Our city deer already know to look both ways before they cross the road. And I saw one at the Swanhaven crosswalk by the school the other day, like holding her little fawns back. So they know all about traffic and stuff like that. I think they're pretty smart, these deer. With that being said, I would move that the Operational Services Committee recommend Council direct administration to 1, address the Boulevard Naturalization Pilot Program to return areas adjacent to residential private property to pre-pilot mowing rotations. 2, adjust the Boulevard Naturalization Pilot Program to return the south portion of the 84th Avenue pilot area to pre-pilot mowing rotations to avoid further tree conflicts with existing overhead power and snow storage capacity. And 3, adjust city-wide locations of naturalization outside of the Boulevard Naturalization Pilot Program to accommodate fire-smart principles where possible as presented in Attachment 4.
Thank you, Councillor Thiessen. Is there any other comments to this motion? No? We'll call the question. Thank you, and that's carried. I look forward to the conversation here shortly. Are you going to have another motion?
Yeah, I'm going to try another subsequent motion, if I may. I would direct administration to bring back a report to, I guess I want to say council, because I think we all want a piece on this, on changing the designation of ER to MR in the Mission Heights neighborhood and the benefits and the, I guess, pitfalls of doing that. Obviously, what we've heard as a negative from administration so far is that the mowing schedule there is fairly difficult. We can't hit those angles and slopes. Something that I'm hoping to get is when we have MR and we have park space, such as like the sledding hill at Muskosipi Park, we still get a mower up that graded hill as well to chop it down. So I've heard the detractions, and I've heard the detractions from the neighborhood on letting the grass grow long. But I think we've heard enough over the last 4 years that we should bring forward a motion that, actually represents what the neighborhood's looking for and what administration's trying to say and how we bridge that and make a decision from there. So that's all I'm looking for out of this motion. Thank you.
Thank you. You can't. Can you? Okay, you can speak. But you're going to speak?
No,
An hour later, whichever. Go ahead.
I appreciate Councillor Thiessen making that motion. I hope that committee will support it. I also think the other conversation, I don't think it needs to be part of the motion, but the other conversation we need to have is I've heard from the neighborhood, we heard delegations here, and I've heard them say in one-on-one conversations that the concerns grassland more than the forested stands that are already there. And I think that if there are parts of that ravine that we legitimately can't mow for legitimate safety reasons, that think we should be having some conversation. All right, is just like we we're talking about with our boulevards, is there something we should do more for those areas than just trees? So to be clear, I'd like to mow more than we're mowing right now, but also I'm okay naturalizing parts of that ravine for safety reasons, but let's do it more intentionally. So I look forward to more conversations on that ravine. I hope that committee will support us having more conversations on that ravine.
Thank you. Any more comments? No? I'm just going to say, I think one of the questions I know will be coming from me, so this is a preamble, is in the mowing piece, if we've done it before in past years on that grade, is it an issue of qualified staff who understand and know how to mow that type of grade instead of putting, someone who may not have the experience and that scares them? So I get that and I understand it. So I'm just curious how we could do it before and we're not doing it now, what the differences are. You can speak to that?
Sure, yeah, Chair Bosch. Because we have done something in the past doesn't necessarily mean that it was correct or proper, and that's the concern with some of the higher slope angles around many different sites. It's part of the concern and the conversation we had with fire as well regarding, where we can go in and do some mowing along these, residential and naturalization boundaries, if we can call it that. And so that's some of the concern regarding some of the steeper slopes that have been measured in various different locations, is around the fact that those mowers that we have on those slopes perhaps shouldn't be up on those slopes. So it is something that we have to look at, and we certainly work within the OH&S, Occupational Health and Safety, which of course gives some of that decision back to the operator themselves to ensure that they're safe and feeling safe in those pieces of equipment while mowing those slopes.
Is there a way that we could have some sort of diagram of that ravine that could allocate pieces that are not safe for a mower and staff versus spots that can be mowed that would, make the residents around there feel that they still have what they used to have to some degree?
Chair Bosch, there are some measurements that we could potentially take within the area to see what a potential expanded scope could be that is still sort of within the safety tolerances that we would want to adhere to. So,
thank you. I think that we'll have further conversations at council. So, you have one more comment?
Yeah, I just know it sounds like we're going to be having more conversation about this. So I know a question I'll ask then too is, for those steeper slopes, are there other methods that we could use that we could do, still give a mow a year to those areas that are safer than using machinery? For example, not saying it was always the safest, but I know I operated brush cutters on very steep slopes back in my civil culture day. And are there other methods than big machinery that could get us at least a mow a year out of those areas that we can't get an actual machine up? So I'd love to have that conversation as well when this comes back to us.
Thank you. We do have those robotic lawnmowers, do we not, anymore? Is it gone?
Chair Bosch, yeah, the mower you're referring to is no longer.
It died?
It
didn't die. It was sent back to the manufacturer.
Oh, go ahead. No, you're good. Okay. Anyway, perhaps that's an idea. I don't know the cost. We'd have to look at that. Maybe that is something that Councillor Palat was talking about as far as a levy to cut those pieces down with a robot instead of putting someone's life at risk or work at risk. So I will move to the question now. Go ahead. Okay, we will see that at council next Monday. And thank you, Mr. DeReeves, for all of that. And I think we will go on to number 7, outstanding items list. Chief Lavin.
Thank you, Chair Bosch. One amendment would be the item 1289, Municipal Food Waste Diversion Program. We'll expect to bring back a report in the first quarter of 2024.
Thank you. And we need a motion. Councillor Thiessen.
I guess so. I would move that we approve the outstanding items list as amended.
Thank you. That's in order. We'll call the question. And that is carried. Thank you all for attending this meeting, and we will adjourn.